and practice, years of it.
What are they doing now? Are they practicing?
All right. Yeah, well, yeah, I like the silence too. Just sit in silence for a second. Yeah, I'll check in first. Yeah, had a great morning so far. Also, just because you mentioned it, Cheryl, like some like kinetic energy in my body, and I like moving meditation and find it easier to relax in motion than sitting sometimes. Um, and yeah, I'm just thrilled to see you. I'm glad to see Nathan when he got here. He just like strikes me with his great demeanor, and yeah, Cheryl as well. It's great to see you smile. And I said it already, but I like your green hat. Colors are great in the world. Um, so yeah, that's me checking in. Whoever wants to check in next.
I can check in. I'm doing pretty well. I have a lot of energy moving through me, and I've been on Zoom all day in different contexts and calls that have had such different flavors. I feel like I'm just kind of like at a buffet. And one thing that I'm noting is like being here with y'all, I got this new imaginal frame for being on Zoom that's like helping me energize, which is like instead of looking at my screen, I'm like looking through my screen. And I'm like as though it's a window, and I'm seeing you, and it helps me so much to tune into my body and actually feel present with you. Whereas before I would often kind of have this feeling of like, oh, Zoom, and I'm not really with you, and I hate being in, I'm here, and now I like actually have this feeling I'm like communing with people in such a deeper way just from this shift in how I'm understanding like the prepositionality of my experience. uh, and yeah, I've had like I've cried, I've laughed, I've had like deep insights into what I'm doing with my life. It's been a wild day, and now I'm happy to just be here and see what this is. That's me.
It's a great day.
It's a pretty good
I thought
day.
you were describing the arc of like a period of time, and you were like, oh, that's
Oh, it's today. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you checked in with the invocation of the screen as a window or a portal. And as you were describing it, I was feeling I almost wanted to move my hand towards the screen and reach through it. And it felt like I could. Like there was this moment of, oh, I could just like hold your face or like yeah. And with that came this heightened sense of intimacy and yeah, like a kind of like an embodied experience of pleasure in being with the two of you here right now. So that feels really good. And how am I arriving? I mean, before the recording started, I guess, I do still feel like this kinetic energy. That I think that's the way it was described. I just feel like there is some major current of energy that are moving through me right now. And there's such, it kind of demands of me to some extent, like a lot of committed practice and intentional awareness around how to hold that energy and what it means to flow with it skillfully. Because sometimes like what ends up happening is that it's easier for me to try to find these other ways of, I guess, like avoiding or numbing or unskillfully finding ways to leak it elsewhere so that I don't have to stay with it. So right now I'm kind of framing it as there's like a kind of creative energy that that really is seeking its unfoldment through me as a vessel. So the only thing what I really want to do is to be as clean and full of integrity as a vessel to allow that energy to move. So a lot of that requires not being in my own way, which is easier said than done, especially as kind of like an every moment practice. So that's how I'm arriving, checked in.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was wondering too, Nathan, if you would start and just share kind of the view, care, action ideas, and maybe we could kind of connect that to some of whatever we talk about today, because it's really fun to play with and learn about. And if someone watches this, then they could learn something about it as well.
Sure. So this is like falls into the heading of sort of a theory of wisdom. So not a definition, but just sort of like trying to look at things in an integrated fashion. So what we have is that wisdom is a process of harmonizing view, care, and action. So view is the way that I look at myself, other people in the world. That's view. Care is what's meaningful to me. What are my values? Like what makes my heart sing? That's care. And then action, like how do I solve complex problems in unique situations? How do I respond to the moment? And when I harmonize view, care, and action, I'm in the process of wisdom. So it's not a state or a thing that it ends at some point. It's just a process that I continually go through. And then I can try to deepen that with another sentence of tuning into the flourishing of relationship. So this is like wisdom has a certain direction, and it's like trying to tune into what's flourishing, what would make the relationship to myself, to y'all, like even in some ways to the world at large, flourish. Can I tune into that at every moment and just tune in over and over and over in this process, harmonizing my view, my care, my action. And then if we're doing all of this, we're like sort of doing wisdom training. I mean, there are other things that are worth doing, but we're training our wisdom, our capacity to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and where did it was that inspired by just your life experiences? And like I know you're like a super researcher.
Oh,
Or was
all of these things?
yeah, where
Yeah.
has this come from? Yeah.
So it's all coming from a project that's called Respond, which is a network of wisdom researchers, wisdom teachers, people who are working in this field. They're experts, they're practitioners themselves. So I tried to make a synthesis of like a compression of the different systems that they use. One of the reasons that I'm trying to do that is to in some sense, I hesitate to use the word demystify, because we want to keep mystery is the not knowing, and tuning into that is like a very important aspect of this. But it maybe de-jargon a lot of what wisdom is, so that people don't think of it as something that I don't understand, that doesn't relate to me, but is like directly in my experience, very relevant, salient to finding meaning in my own life, and then also fractally addressing things like the meta crisis that culture wars, the meaning crisis, like things that are happening that are a result of like having lost this as a process that we're engaging in. So yeah, John Vervaeke, Benita Roy, Zach Stein, Steve Marsh, I mean, the list goes on. People that I've talked to, these wonderful teachers, and then I try to take what they're saying and compress it into something that we could talk about in a coffee shop, just to like start a conversation. Yeah.
And I know you've encountered this framework as well, Cheryl. So what are your, like, has it helped you, or what do you think about it as, or add to it maybe, if you have like depth you could add to what he said?
Yeah, I feel like what I appreciate about Nathan's I guess like what I really admire in the way that we collaborate, when we're given that opportunity, is I like orient more towards sometimes like fully just dropping myself into the deep end. And it's kind of sometimes like a sink or swim situation. And it's like I just kind of observe, and I do try to bring a lot of like a sense of like a phenomenological rigor to what is happening as different capacities arise to be able to allow me to essentially survive. It's like meet the needs and the fit of the environment and the context that's yeah, asking for these capacities to arise. So a lot of it I think that might be, yeah, I don't want to make any distinctions around whether like women orient more towards embodied learning, but the pattern does kind of show up a lot sometimes where it's like I do jump kind of right into the direct experience, almost like full mystery mess of it all. And then what I really love actually is the capacity to like experience almost like the fullness and intensity and mystery of that territory, and then kind of like also be able to perceive, like it's like develop a logos about it. It's like develop the kind of scaffolding or like the markers on the ground, the little signposts, so that whatever we are all kind of weirdly experiencing through this liminal time is something that can be integrated and synthesized into the sorts of, like, it's not the capital like T truth map, but it is enough that we can kind of support others to be able to figure out like what is happening mysteriously through our collective bodies. And Nathan is just very, very, I remember one of our first encounters actually at Willow, this meditation retreat we were at together, he had like shared this meditation that his, I think then maybe 10-year-old son, was he 10 then? I can't remember.
Yeah,
But he, yeah, you wrote this meditation, I think together with Hannes, and he basically described in this meditation like this process of being outside and relating with like objects in such a way that you start to almost discern the emptiness of, basically it's like high level almost like non-dual awareness, but described by a 10-year-old. And it was so skilled, it was like very, very well done, and in this way where I kind of like, yeah, I just deeply valued and understood the kind of scaffolding that is really worthwhile in supporting, I think, like everyone to be able to understand what is this amorphous territory that we call wisdom, or kind of like the skillful means of relating with and being in the world. So that's how I relate to a lot of what Nathan, like when I hear about view, care, action, or view, care, and is it action?
yeah.
Yeah, view, care, and action. It's like, oh, of course, that's so intuitive. Like that makes so much sense. And it doesn't feel like it hides or tries to conceal the complexity. It's just like, it's something to hold on to for people to gather together around and be able to share. So yeah, that, I feel like that's kind of my first response to that.
So what's your 10-year-old son had an experience of a non-duality of a rock? I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
Well, so what I did was I was trying to it's called I think the meditation was called perception. And what I did was to try to explain sort of, if you take, I mean, I'm going to go into a little jargony here. This is what I try to usually avoid, but since you're asking, if you take like Piaget's concept of schema, like schemas, and or schemata, and Gibson's theory of affordances, you get like a kind of insight, a westernized insight into emptiness. I mean, emptiness is always, and I don't claim to have explained emptiness to my 10-year-old son or understand it myself, but like, you're feeling into like the depth of something that's like unfathomably deep. But it gives you this like way of looking into it. And I tried to explain these concepts in a way that, in language that he could understand, and help him to see it. And then we recorded that together. We recorded him speaking this meditation out for people to listen to. So you start in a park with a rock in your hand, and you just press play. Those are the instructions. And then you, like, Hannes, I think he may have been like, 9 years old or something, is guiding you into seeing how you're seeing. Like the way of looking that's happening right now, which is really great, because the reason that I made it was that I was getting frustrated trying to write about this. I was teaching it at what was then Human Systems, is now School for Social Design. I was trying to teach people this, to become aware of this, the phenomenology of experience. And as I would write it, and they're reading it on a screen, and you're just like dissociated from the experience, it's very difficult. I couldn't find a way to say, like, to do this with pixels. But if you do it with audio while you're standing and looking out at the park in front of you, and I'm describing how to look, or Hannes is describing how to look in this very, very simple language, like, then my hope was to get people into that experience where they just like, they understand what I mean, not from because I explained it well, but because they experienced it.
Right. So you're using this system to have a practical effect, not just to like create a big like bookshelf full of information that that can help people live more wisely, in this case by having a certain perceptual shift. And I'm still a little curious about this rock and this non-dual thing, but that's great. And so out of that came the view care action. And
oh, no, this was just I think Cheryl's pointing to that was probably that for a long time one of my interests has been translating these, what otherwise it can be like esoteric jargony things that are just like super important, into something that's digestible, and like that seems more
Gotcha.
closer to experience, like not just because you can read about affordances and schemata, and you can like, oh, you think of it in these models, these abstractions, and it's like, no, actually notice it in
Right.
looking and being here right now, like notice it now. And that's what so this compression helps people to do that, because then they don't get lost in trying to understand and then go away from experience. But if I say like, well, you have views, you care about things, you take actions. We haven't really like jumped into the abstract land where I'm thinking about it over here. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening right now. So I
Yeah,
try
and
to
that is just demystifying. That's exactly, I think, the right word for that, is because like mystical has a whole etymological like track you can study, and it's weird because that we've, I think, gone from like mystics to mysticism to mystical experience. And even when you start to talk about these things as an experience, you're kind of abstracting. The language is shifting culturally over hundreds or thousands of years. And yeah, but demystifying is to clarify, to make clear, to there's so much jargon in the esoteric world, right? Like it's esoteric by definition. Esoteric means known by very few, or hidden, or knowledge, secret knowledge and stuff like that. And yeah, so I also, while you were speaking, Cheryl, thought I have a friend who's an existential psychologist, which I didn't even know was a thing until I met him. But in Europe, it's more popular, I guess. And he was saying too, because I love uh, understanding some of the differences between men and women. He said women are just more phenomenologically embodied, like when they come from things. Because I relate to that a lot more. I love like being around an environment and feeling emotions in my face and my body and that kind of stuff. And he was like, yeah, that's a way. And then there's this other way that's like, um, oh, the schema and the there's a difference between a schema and a map in the world, and you can get into all these conceptual nuances, which are when you bridge them, right, just to keep it on, like, practice is fun. It's really fun to take that third person or second person intellectual view and then experience it in your life, or vice versa, like have this thing that's hard to express and then put it into words in a way that you could share. And when you share it, other people go, oh, did you think about it this way, or did you think about it this way, or there's another. And so they're both like, they feed each other in the ancient Greek sense. And then the like human imagination is kind of the link, I think, between the body and the theoria and the conceptual world. And Tom Cheetham, like, and on good grounds, keeps saying, like, I think it's all imagination. It's imagination everywhere. So there's even like the intellectual part that we're talking about, the system or the language, and then the felt experience, and then so much of our reality is experienced through just like what we picture in our mind and how we picture it, and how dynamic those pictures are. And yeah, so that maybe will also be fun to unpack these 4 areas of emphasis. Maybe Nathan, you could do that as well, because I think that's, again, it's brilliant. It's really practical. I won't say more, but yeah.
Sure. So this also came from the gathering that we had at the Monastic Academy in August. Cheryl was there, and a couple of the people, we brought together 9 teachers into dialogue about creating. I mean, this is this comes from Zach Stein, who was also there. The idea of a meta curriculum, which to my anti-jargony sensibilities is like, oh no, meta curriculum, who knows what that is? But we were developing a meta curriculum. It's fine to use that word. It's an accurate word. I didn't ever bother to translate it into something that would be less jargony. But we ended up we're talking about like wisdom and the development of wisdom training, and came up with these 4 areas of emphasis in wisdom training. And I remember them in using the acronym DIME. So DIME, dialogue, imaginal, mindfulness, embodiment. And if you are doing a wisdom practice well, then you're engaging all of this. But you probably have some kind of emphasis. So if we take an example of like, you're doing a seated meditation practice, you may be emphasizing mindfulness, but in order to really deeply engage with it, you're going to also be doing embodiment. You're going to be doing kind of a dialogue with awareness. So this is a kind of interesting, like internal, like looking at what am I paying, where does my attention go? And you're also doing an imaginal practice of like sensing my body as a field of energy, for example. And so depending on the styles, you'll always have different manifestations of this. But like if you take contact improv, this is an embodiment practice, but you're also dialoguing with other people's bodies as you move and dance. You're also like in the imaginal of what is it like to be here right now. And you're also being mindful about like, how is my body moving? Where's the weight? Like, how are things going? So what you can see there is like in any practice, you're going to have an emphasis. Maybe 1 or 2 of these things are emphasized, but they're all kind of online in some way. If we're training wisdom in the way that we outlined earlier about harmonizing view, care, and action by tuning into the flourishing of relationship.
Yeah, and what like when you encountered these ideas, Cheryl, or co-created them in a sense, you were at that process as well. What were your initial thoughts, or what do you think about it now, if that's easier?
Yeah, I'm noticing I have this yeah, I guess I'm holding attention. I'm holding attention right now, but it's very much based in my own personal experience where it's the tension of like coming at a Gestalt experience through kind of like the pre-categorization of the aspects of that experience. And I think it's because I'm rooting it in the personal, because I find that it's very difficult for me in the way that I learn to break something down into its aspects, and then try to almost like figure out how to get to the whole from there. Like I find it's really interesting. Like I find that I have to almost like serendipitously or like surprisingly just like have the experience, and then from that understand, like it's like start to make sense of, or yeah, like kind of figure out the nuances of the different dimensions of that experience. And I have a hard time like trying to, I guess, like even from like a teaching approach or methodology, just is it like for something like wisdom, is it something that's better? You know what? And I know it's a both and that's why it's a very generative tension that I'm holding, which is like how much of it needs to be kind of scaffolded to some extent so that someone kind of has enough of an understanding of, yes, there's an imaginal capacity. Yes, there's an embodiment capacity. Yes, there's like dialogue and all that. And then how much of it is also, you have to just be thrown into a situation where all of those are online and in kind of like interrelationship with one another. And then after you have that kind of like intensified experience, then a teacher is there to guide you through what that was about. It's like, oh, when you were doing this and you're responding in this way, that was like an embodiment capacity. So I think it's basically both. I think I'm really curious about entry points into something like that. Like I just did a driver's test yesterday, like my written driver's exam, because I'm learning how to be a 16-year-old adult right now. And I like I find it was just a series of multiple choice questions, learning about road signs and everything. And I kind of understood why I needed to do that, like learning all the rules of the road. And then there was something deep in me that also knows that there's no way I'm actually going to know how to drive until I'm on the road driving. It's like, it's just until I'm there and I'm in context and I'm figuring out what it means to like that kind of deep with like embodied understanding of why you give someone right of way, not just because it's a rule, but because there is kind of like, there's a deep way in which it makes sense for bodies to move together in a way that coheres within like a city, essentially, or within some kind of environment. So I think I'm just trying to make sense of when and where theory and practice interact in a way that feels very, very generative.
Yeah. So it's like we're at like a four-way stop, and it's like, okay, do we need to be mindful? Should we be dialoguing with each other? Like, is there an embodied outcome that might happen, like crashing if we don't coordinate well? Because the coordination aspect is really subtle in life. There's a cognitive scientist named Hannah Yeager. She's in Europe, and she was talking about how we're like these kind of embodied beings trying to just generate behaviors in this chaotic field, essentially. And if you're in a hallway walking towards someone else that was in the hallway, I was actually at a park earlier today, and it's like if we're both about to hit each other and seeing each other from 40 yards away, and we like you go to your left and I go to my right, then we dance into each other's way again. And so it's so easy to miscoordinate things. But if we have like a a shared system. Like I almost wonder if there should be a fifth emphasis of like cultural cognitive grammar to get at that language aspect of the other four. And like, okay, if we're all on the same page, we have these shared norms, then it's like, oh, cool. It's magical, but this stop sign thing just worked. None of us died. And if we're not, then, you know, the end of the game, so to speak. You play the finite game and the infinite game is over. Um, so so I love, and I deeply appreciate the you keep pulling it back into the real world, right? Because it's so easy to lose that sense of things. And it
Yeah.
really is more meant to be like a helper of life, not just a substitute for living, where you're always living through the system or something like that. Like it needs to participate in the real, not become the real.
Yeah, I think that and it kind of speaks to like this first part, which is the theory of wisdom part. I think it's like maybe helpful for everyone. And this other part, when we're talking about the emphases, these four different emphases, is mostly helpful for teachers, I think, to sort of see, oh, I need to give certain instructions while I'm circling, or leading a circle and circling, or somebody might be like not recognizing the importance of being, as like Benito Roy says, like here and out with their attention posture, like a certain kind of embodiment, awareness posture, I guess she calls it. And so like that might be something that I intuitively understand, but when I'm trying to teach someone, I'm going to need to point to these things, these aspects of what's going on, so that they can tune in a way, if I'm trying to train them. But at the same time, what Cheryl's saying is also true. I can design an experience in which you just like thrust into like not being able to not do that and then explain it to you later, or not. Like I don't need this part of it. I don't think is like essential for somebody who's trying to become more wise to know about. I think it's just like a helpful tool if you're trying to teach, to help orient you to like make sure that you're tracking these areas and communicating in a way that helps people come into their bodies, that helps them like stay in dialogue, understand how it feels to be here, that it's like watching and like having a bit of metacognitive experience at the same time. This is just good, like a good map for teachers, but I think for like learners, probably not even important. Unless you're teaching yourself, in which case we're in this kind of hybrid space. If you're watching videos, if watching Robert Gray channel on YouTube and then trying to teach yourself how to be wise, it might be worth thinking about. There's also I think something about building an ecology of practices that's really balanced might involve, this is sort of the edge of like, I'm not sure, but this is a hypothesis that I have, might involve like looking at the practices that you're currently doing and seeing if if all of those four aspects are emphasized, and if not, trying to find practices that emphasize these other aspects. So maybe you're doing seated practice, or maybe you're doing, let's say, circling. You're doing circling, so you're really involved in like mindful dialogue, and you might not be as aware of the imaginal. So you want to do something that emphasizes the imaginal, or the embodiment piece. You want to do something that emphasizes embodiment, just to kind of like balance out, so that you don't become sort of lopsided in the way that you're approaching. Ultimately, what you want to do is have all of this online firing transparent to yourself. And when we're talking about it, we're making it opaque, like stepping back, looking at. It's a move that's useful sometimes, but isn't the thing to do.
Yeah, I remember hearing you talk to John about trying to make like a system that doesn't act like a closed system, in such a way that the solutions that we don't have access to right now emerge through that system to heal the world. So you're trying to not try. There's a great book called that, and you can kind of do that. Like he talks about it in enough detail in the book that you can start to try and not try, and get at that weird place where you're both mindful and like cognitively ready to spring or something like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's super. That's why I liked it so much when you first told me about it, is because it's so cool to evaluate practices that are like you're potentially going to start trying, or your ongoing evolving practice. This, like, the idea that like, there's one practice or one set and I'll do it for the next 40 years. And it's much more of like a squiggly line that is, I'm doing too much of this, or maybe I'm not doing enough of this. And like saying like, oh, well, I was thinking about starting a sacred reading practice, but actually, you know, I want to make sure it has dialogue and it has you know, embodiment as well, because it gets at a lot of imaginal or something like that. Or we always meditate at the beginning and, oh, that was useful because it was doing mindfulness or something like that.
Yeah.
So within
I
the
think it's
context of,
especially,
yeah.
oh yeah, sorry.
Okay.
No, I just think it's especially useful when somebody's doing it on their own. For example, just like the dialogue piece, you might just never recognize it. Like if I do my meditation practice here alone in my room and I don't come into a dialogue practice, I'm going to be limiting the ways in which I'm wise, like, and probably even maybe something's more important than even these four aspects is like making my wisdom to practice won't transfer to my life. So if I'm like able to reach the sixth jhana on my cushion, but I don't, but I lose it as soon as I get up, and I don't incorporate that, integrate that in my life, like I'm not doing wisdom training. I'm just getting really good at meditation. Um, so there's a way in which like these things, if you take a practice in itself and you're not like really going at these four emphases, you can see like, well, if I left one of these out, how would I not be integrating it into my life? I would be just doing, I'd be getting good at a practice rather than getting good at life, which is kind of the intention of all these practices, to get better, to live well, and to, yeah, I guess I'll leave it there.
Yeah, because flourishing, right? Like flourishing is the point. And if you're like omitting one of these and then you add it in, you'll like be happier. You'll be living more well fit. Cheryl, I think you said that in the very beginning. That word fit is super important because it's between you and the self, right? Like that may be the cushion part, is you have like, oh, I have such a great relationship with myself, but then not with community, and I can't appreciate it in other people maybe, or maybe it's not dynamic enough, because when you start getting them all in harmony, it's I love that idea of stereoscopic. And it's like when my left eye is doing its left eye thing and my right eye is doing its right eye thing, and they merge, then I'm on a whole better, I can see in 3 dimensions instead of two, and there's a richness in me that wasn't there before. And Layman Pascal has a really cool has a lot of really cool ideas about virtue, and how like it's this harmonization of multiplicity into higher levels of being, to really just add some jargon and make it abstract.
I was gonna say one more thing, which is like, for anybody watching this video, or if you're trying to teach wisdom practice, this can also be like a handy little thing to like, this sort of like as a proto assessment tool, to say like, if somebody embodied, are they able to stay grounded and present in dialogue? Do they have access and agency in the imaginal? Are they mindful and able to step back and like look at metacognitively, understand what's happening here? And if they're not, you might be able to like pick a good practice that's going to like be the lowest hanging fruit for them when they're trying to engage in the process of becoming more wise. You're like, oh yeah, go do this embodiment practice. You're just not able to feel your feelings. You need to be in your body. It's part of this. So you're going to have a little bit of a diagnostic tool, although a pretty rough one. There's something else that we're with the Respond network right now, and I know that actually you are like kind of taking the lead on that, Robert, is to look at the assessment piece. Like, how do we assess people when they come in, and for wisdom teachers to be able to, we're kind of doing this research on that right now. But I'd say what we have right now from the teachers is, this would be a rough and ready kind of, how do I figure out what practice would be good for me to start doing right now? If I can assess that myself, or probably I would recommend having somebody that knows you well assess your capacity in these areas, and then together picking what kind of practice that emphasizes my weakest points, like train the weakness, so to speak, so that you can really get the most out of your practice.
Yeah, I love that you said train the weakness, because like it's so easy to spiritually bypass, or even just like not even consciously or unconsciously, you're just not aware of these weaknesses. And so this framework, especially I love the adding like the dialogue part, because I think John Vervaeke, who's such a like a central hub of all of this efforts, he has like the meditation, contemplation, movement practice part. He had that like for almost from the beginning, and then adding that social element like the communitas and the skillfulness within and between. um I think it's like the missing piece, like the some Taylor Barry yesterday said it was like finding the different pieces of the Triforce and putting together like the super Triforce that opens things up, like that communal element, because so many people in the meaning crisis, they're monological, and I'm sure I'm guilty of that, and we all are in some degree like that. The individual is the ultimate piece that's like the Western cry of the last 100 years, and community is so powerful. Like so many people are lonely in some ways. So I love that part of it. I think it feels really solid as a like a assessment tool, and as something to help people reflect on what they might be doing well or missing. Um, yeah. And again, I love that Cheryl's like, no, it's also just jump in the deep end and play with life, because life's the greatest teacher. Life shows us all the patterns. And yeah, I think part of the meaning crisis, as well as like waiting for like this mysterious afterlife, or being in this cognitive um world that doesn't like what is the Tin Man? Is that the one that lacks the feeling? In the Wizard of Oz, like I feel like there's a lot of that in these communities, and yeah. So what have you been thinking, Cheryl? I'm watching you over there, and you're thinking about things, and what are your thoughts again?
I feel like I'm swirling in so much. No, it's a good feeling. Although then when I'm swirling in this much, I always have to preface before speaking that I'm going to try talk, which is I don't know what I'm about to say, but I'm just going to take a bit of a leap and try to see where the stream takes me. There's been, yeah, I've been very present also with something that I just like wrote down as a kind of innate or primal wisdom. It's like, maybe I think Bonnie would call it nature, or Steve March might call it like wholeness. But I wonder how much, like, there's like an element of this work of wisdom teaching that feels much more, it feels like it's like an unlocking or unleashing, or even like an activation of that which is already latently held within the student. So it's less like a linear developmental, oh, here's like all the new things I might accumulate so that I can grow. It's sometimes like there's like this other, like almost like a growing down, where it's like here's like all the things, especially adult education, I think it's like, here's all the things we need to actually shed and let go of. And there's like a process of almost like coming deeper and deeper to like a primal trust in the ways, in like how much we are already as human beings attuned to a deeper and more mysterious, harmonious order that like sometimes is called the Tao or whatever else, like whatever word you kind of use to gesture towards that sense of alignment or harmony. And a lot of that is so simple. Like that's the thing. There's like, I think as a Taoist at heart, or just that kind of way of wanting to come back to, and it is like it feels like a coming back to sometimes. And it's not simply like a coming back to a past that is a regression. It's more like a reintegration of, and a remembrance of, I think I would almost refer to like Jean Gebser, the philosopher. It's like these other structures of consciousness that he would characterize as like the archaic structure of consciousness, the magical structure of consciousness, the mythopoetic structure of consciousness, that I think the very contemporary, modern, rational structure of consciousness has like cast away or banished because it felt very dangerous, or like maybe even difficult to control. And I think it actually needed to go through that phase. So I think there's like a way in which I'm curious about how to, it's like move in the direction of teaching that isn't just an accumulation of more models, or like more mapping, or more things that we have to almost like fill our cognitive maps with, so that it just takes us further. It sometimes feels like it's like it takes us still more and more into the virtual and less in the direction of like this stretching of both what we know kind of in our, like we know through what we're taught, like the maps that we're taught, but then like actually letting it sink down into that deeper wisdom transmission. It's like that transmission, like the reason why I think we talk so much about teacherly transmission, or we're starting to move more towards a language of apprenticeship, is because there's a kind of learning that's so innate and so embodied and happens in the gaps in between spaces where you're just with a teacher. And a teacher can be like an elder, like a teacher, or it could be just like being with a rock, like a rock can be. And
That's what I was thinking while you were talking.
Transition. Yeah. And it's like, what is happening in my relating with this rock right now, or with Bonnie, that is where I can feel something shifting. And it's often in that, it's in a soulful like relationship of deep admiration of the mystery of the other. It's like, oh, I feel attracted to, like, I feel attracted to both of you. Like there's like aspects of a gift in you, or a kind of wholeness in you, that is the reason why I showed up in this call, because there's this sense of, oh, we are unlocking something collectively together that is of a kind of potential that wouldn't be achievable on my own. So yeah, I guess, and maybe that's me now try talking into a different thread, which is a very ecological kind of learning that happens when we open up to all of these, like all of these more than human, almost like ways of absorbing wisdom all the time. Yeah. So I think that's probably where some of my fear stems sometimes around, especially I think in these liminal web communities. Like I love it. I love it. I love logos. I love philosophy. Like I love all the teachers. And then it's like, but where I really like where that love comes from, where that deep arrows comes from, is like more than just like the words. It's like in that felt sense of I am being actively transformed, and I can feel in the way that I'm breathing and interacting with like my family and the world and the future and the past differently because of the way that I'm being touched by these teachers and by their teachings. So it's like, how do you make space for that part of the arrows, I guess?
Yeah, and like you said, we're in a world that doesn't trust that part of ourselves. And I did like a 2-hour group practice this morning, and then some contemplation, and then went out in the woods and got in this like flow state, just taking pictures of leaves falling and squirrels and like, I go, oh my gosh, there's this willow and the wind is catching like the little puffs of willow, and oh my God, like my mind is being blown by that. And then there's a part of me that's like, yeah, you fool, what are you doing? You're not on task right now. Like focus on the task or whatever. And you there's this relearning to trust that, or find the balance in it, is probably a better way, because you don't want to just be like in this childlike flow state at a red light and not go when it turns green, right? You need to be able to kind of switch, elegantly between both. But there's a real lack of like inspiration and leadership to point to, unlike success, right? We can point to people all day that are like, oh, this is what a successful person should look like, or this is what a successful relationship should look like. But that playfulness, that embodied kind of being in the center of nature or whatever, is, yeah, super revitalizing, and really where we're meant to be. In you reminded me a lot of like in Zen training, where they, like, I've read, they say like you're overcooked, and then you come to Zen temple to like reopen to the fact that, like, when you see 100 people in the subway, there are 100 different souls. It's not one type of category of person that's annoying and boring you. It's like all of life is right there in that subway, in those people. And yeah. So that, again, I'm so glad you're here, Cheryl, to keep that balance between the logos and the eros, or the logos and the physis, maybe, like the nature of being. And yeah, so good. This is why practice is fun. This is why it's fun to think about these things, because they really do impact your views and your the way you participate in reality. Yeah. I was so peaceful. I like walked within 2 inches of a squirrel, and it didn't notice me either, because the squirrel and its mind was on like acorns or something. And then we turned around and saw each other. We're both like, "What? What are you doing so close to me?" So it's fun to play in nature, but also like the adult play of it is so important as well.
Yeah, I have kind of like a very relevant and synchronous anecdote, but I took a bit of a break from, or like, because I was traveling a lot, I wasn't doing as much Aikido, and I just started doing Aikido like February this year.
Wow.
I fell in love with the practice because it's so different from anything that I had done before, in terms of like, yeah, it's an interesting, the dojo and the whole culture of it is like this integration of discipline and also release into flow.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday I went back to class and did something that was so hard, which is, I've spent most of my training in Aikido basically, like, it's like they're very good about, you have to learn all the moves. Like, you have to learn all the moves and to kind of like do it again and again and again, so that you reach like a kind of grace where you're no longer breaking it down in your head, but you kind of know it enough that then you're noticing like the energy with which like the subtle energy with which like you shift in such a way that that's where true Aikido, I guess, comes in. And yesterday there was this, we in the last part of the class, because I'd been training for 2 hours at that point, last part of this class, the teacher decided to kind of throw us into half an hour of nonstop, like each person just keeps coming at each other, trying to attack. And then you have to keep knowing how to respond. And it's like a nonstop kind of like, you go. And there's no time to think. And I found it to be so like, it's like a simultaneous like terror took over me, because there was no way for me to think about anything. I couldn't, the moment I think, oh, what move should I make right now? It's the thing that takes me right out of that flow. So I just had to keep recommitting to my trust in like, what needs to happen will just flow through my body. But I also wasn't skilled enough. I just wasn't skilled enough. I didn't have enough moves memorized into my body to be able to do that well. So then I would just be in the situation where I'm in a class of like, 15 people, and I would just freeze because I was stuck in this place where I didn't know what to do. I didn't have time to think about it. And my body wasn't trained enough to know how to respond. And it was a really humbling experience for me, because it helped me actually it was like this deep recognition of the value and importance of continued practice. Because I know that if I'd been continuing my training for like the months before that I'd taken my break during, it would have been so much easier. But because I wasn't just doing my rounds, I wasn't doing the work. I also wasn't really able to bring like that posture to fore when it was required of me. So I think the reason why I'm naming that is because it's like the paradox of being and becoming. Like, as much as I am naming, oh yes, like there's like an innate wholeness, and like we all kind of know what it is. It's like, no, you also have to put in the work of learning what you don't know and practicing where you want to improve. And that is, yeah, it's like, how do you do both at once? Like, what is the right training ground where you can cultivate like the deep discipline, and like, again, doing the same move over and over and over again so that you can keep getting better at it, and then be thrown into a situation where suddenly all of that needs to meet the demands of life. It's like meet the richness and context of life, where it's spontaneous and you can't predetermine exactly what you're supposed to be doing in that moment. It's like you just have to go and trust yourself. So I think I'm curious about what the Aikido dojo of wisdom practice would look like.
I kind of have this like way of looking at it right now, which is that like any practice can be a wisdom practice if you're engaging in it in that way. But just training yourself to be poised and to respond. Because I mean, I personally like resonated so much with what you're saying with like my bouldering practice. Like I go bouldering all the time. And if I take a week or two off, I notice I'm just like, I don't have that embodied trust and skillfulness to just go at some, but it's always a new problem. There's always different ways that you have to move, things that are required of you that are like unique to that situation and that climb. But yeah, just I think if we were to look at it, it's like what stands out to me is like, if you were really just to try to make it a, like sort of meta recursive about wisdom, it would probably be in relating to myself and other people and the world. Like anything that the practice is that. So like Aikido, you're doing that. But I mean, like, so wait, but I'm gonna ask, like, actually, I'm just like sort of circling back around to myself and being like, when is it not that? Like, what isn't that? So I suppose, yeah, any practice, anything you're doing could be a wisdom practice if you approach it in a way of trying to like tuning into the flourishing of the relationship. Some of them probably a lot harder to make into wisdom practice. Other things are more naturally like fit to that. I can imagine like coding might be a kind of hard one, but I actually don't know that because I've never really done a lot of coding. It's like maybe a bias that I have. And maybe some of these people who are like just love coding and really deeply understand the aesthetics of it and like really like playing with these lines and the programs and these blocks, that could easily be that as well. I'm just thinking about like it being a certain way of tuning in rather than a specific practice. And that then transferring that to your whole life, trying to show up in a way that's tuning in to what's happening right now and responding to it with your full self.
See a lot of
It's an aspiration, by the way. I mean, they say that sometimes. Sometimes I lose track of like when I talk like this, I'm talking about an aspiration and a striving, and sometimes I think I'm wary that like when I talk like that, somebody might hear that and think like, oh, but I don't do that, or I can't do that. I don't do that either. Like I strive to do that, but just before anybody's inner critic starts to make them think that they're less than the rest of us. Like that's an idealized form, but that would be what we're striving to do with this in practice.
It's a really important attitude, keeping your practice aspirationally oriented rather than like, what's this goal that I'm trying to achieve, and if I'm not achieving it, I'm like a lower being or something, versus like, oh, how can this open me up? How can it feed back into itself? And yeah, I think it's a very not to point fingers, but like the 10 Commandments style of living, of like, if you're not doing the 10, you're burning right now, versus like, oh, I wish I could desire to not kill, and then I want to do practices to that. I wish I could honor my grandparents more, and how can that, like, I afford that in the universe, versus like, you know, like you disappointed your father, so you better feel shame now, or something like that. I don't know, these metaphors are not feeling perfect, but it, the you know, the self-referencingness of our ongoing being is really weird, because if you look at yourself very statically, you can definitely compare yourself to an image that you're not, and that can like discourage your practice. Or you can just be inspired by other people and have like a little bit of openness, not like so much that you're just like spiritual bypassing. And I guess that's the danger of being too open with your judgment on yourself, is you could say, oh no, I ate Doritos today, but I did it very in a loving, kind way, and or something like that, where you start misattributing things. But and I think that's the importance of commitment and the value of like, I don't know, I used to have this heuristic that really helped me a lot, of just like, what do people care about? And like, that's how I'm going to judge them. And you could see like, oh, I'll just use John Vervaeke because he's an easy person, probably everyone knows. Like, you can tell what John cares about, because like, if you spend time with him over time, he's always kind of caring about the same things. And you could be maybe cynical at first, say, oh, there's some secret motive. What's this guy into? And then if you keep like hanging around, and he's like, he just keeps loving wisdom and other people and teaching and his science. Like, you can tell science is really important to John. Things like that. The people he cares about, he cares deeply about. And yeah, just returning to that thing that's nourishing you, whether it's rock climbing or art or your religious community or whatever it is. If it is that nourishing thing, then stick with it. Don't you know, it's bottomless. I think all these things have this bottomlessness, and I love Aikido. I've done a little Aikido. I have the Art of Peace over in like 6 feet from me, the book that Morihei Ueshiba wrote, and I do Japanese yoga. I'm training with the head of it that speaks English a little later today, and his teacher's teacher worked with the founder of Aikido, and they get a lot of the principles from this other guy. So I was just really excited when you said that. And Aikido is so great, because I remember like the first or second time I tried it, and it's really physical, and everyone's sweaty, and it's grapply, and you see people that are just so much better than you, but it's also playful. Everyone was super kind to me. There was like, it had all the good things you want in like a community, and it's aspirational in that sense you were saying, Nathan, of like, you can keep returning to it and it keeps challenging you, and when you keep that relationship, it gives back to you. Like, it's there's certain practices and sets of practices and people that invented practices that are just awesome. And the cool thing about the Aikido guy too is he's kind of a mystic to me. I use that label very very flexibly, but he had like an epiphany, another epiphany, and a third epiphany, and then started Aikido. And it's kind of cool that in the last 100 years there's not a lot of mystics to look at, but he's got enough biography on him, and then just this generation of students that had a generation of students that now it's everywhere. And it's kind of cool to see, oh, this might be what Buddhism looked like 2,000 years ago, or what some other Zoroastrian looked like 5,000 years ago, when someone just got it so right that it was transmittable and beneficial to those that transmitted. So that was a bit of like a praising rant about Aikido, but it's like a really cool, I love hearing people say that, and you know, it makes it so it doesn't have to just be like a digital community. You can just join your local Aikido gym, and some of them are going to be more spiritually oriented than others. Some are more physical, some are more like mental, but that's awesome. You don't need some internet guru to intellectually follow. You can just get participation through a lot of these places, and it's just kind of cool that it's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the dojo of life, because it is, I felt such when we were talking about just like this like way of seeing, like an attunement to a way of seeing, where you can kind of unlock everything, like every experience as this, it's like an invitation into wisdom practice. Like every moment can be an invitation into a wisdom practice. And it reminds me of actually John Cheetham. I remember I liked how he described like a soulful or imaginal way of seeing the world. Not necessarily looking at it as, is this like the right way of being in the world, or is this more true? But just like what I think, like he kind of sticks with this phenomenological approach to just like asking what happens to the way the world shows up to you when you choose to see it this way. And that's just for any way of seeing that you adopt, like what happens to the world when you choose to tune into that way of seeing? And is that opening you up more to like truth, beauty, goodness? And I think that's going to change a lot, like depending on circumstance or what, like right now, I do feel like collectively we're in this context where we keep referring to the meta crisis, and that's kind of an abstracted way of just us knowing on some level in our bodies that something is happening that's it's like terrifying on some level. It's like we're feeling the way so much suffering is happening. We're feeling the kind of breakdown of a lot of trust and a sense of like security in our systems. And I feel like when I tune into, for example, like one way I've been really tuning into is like the soulful way of being in the world, like the soul making way of inviting this experience, this felt experience of suffering as like a training in wisdom. It's like right now we're being asked to, not simply as individuals, but as like collectively, almost as a species, we're being asked to meet this crisis as almost like an opportunity for maybe even evolutionary growth. Like I think I say that shyly, but also not lightly. It's like, it's time for us there's an opportunity for us to transmute this, whatever's happening right now, that's like akin to a dark night of the soul into something that is soulfully part of our collective work. So I think we've been talking about practice in the context of who we are as individuals and what we feel called to. And I think there's something deeper on a zeitgeist level, where we're kind of linking up with each other around this need to co-develop wisdom, like collective wisdom capacities, because we know, you know how like Henry Corbin talks about the divine double or the angel out ahead. My sense sometimes is that like as like a human species, there's like a collective divine double that we're sensing into, of like this deep potential of this way in which we could be in the world differently together. And it's kind of right there. It's like, and when you tune into the longing for how different it could be, how sometimes it feels unimaginably different. There's like, it's like, there's this deep instinct to want to just go there, to be closer to it, to be more intimate with it, to almost like let that inner transformation happen. It feels much more like, oh, it's like something just wants to bloom forth from within, rather than even just like but it's also like it's out, I'm not there yet, and I want to be there. So I think that kind of longing, when it's activated, is both terrifying because, yeah, because you can feel how different it can be, and you can feel how far you are from it. But, and at the same time, it kind of makes everything meaningful, I guess. It makes everything part of that journey, that unfolding journey of being more, So yeah, I don't know how to clip. I don't know how to stop.
No, I mean, like I hear you saying like there's kind of this symbolic crisis that we're in, just to like, we have these nourishing the individual soul feels awesome, and doing that in a small community feels doubly awesome, because it has this level of trust and connection and sharedness beyond any of like the cognitive benefits of just all this extra information and feedback and all that kind of stuff. And then there's like this cultural level, and like we're in this like maybe dying body. And also like there's people like I think both of you that are like, but it's not just inevitable that it's going to die. There's actually Simone Weil, another great mystic from the last 100 years, said like you're kind of at an awesome time right now, because you know in the midst of World War II and the craziness of like I think she died before the A bomb was dropped, but like that whole era we're kind of in the shadow of. And it's like, if we can write that course and you know, fix things, it's there's so much potential in the world. There's so much. I wouldn't know either of you if not for the internet. And I've met one of you in person. I hope to meet Nathan at some point in person. And like, so it's not even just this like, oh, this is BS. This is all a digital delusion. It's like, no, it's really like people are coming together and the world is shifting. But that you know, going beyond like the self, friend, family, even like local community, up to that like kind of cultural historical level, yeah, it is a kind of a terror, because the bigness of it is it stretches back thousands of years, and definitely about 300, like the really after the Renaissance into the Industrial Revolution. You know, we started to be able to create impacts in the world that can destroy the world for the first time. We could have battles that would like make a field bloody, and that's sad, and all everything. But now we can just literally like spoil all the oceans. And depression is like you know, not to get too dark, but like young people, really young people, are killing themselves in ridiculous numbers. And it's like that if that's not a symptom of something, then nothing makes sense. Or like, so I know what you're saying, Cheryl. And yeah, for those people that can build the capacity to engage at that level, yes, it is a mystery. Like there's awe and terror and potential in that, I think.
And I think that there's an interesting distinction there where we can talk about personal wisdom. It's like my own tuning into the good, the true, and the beautiful. But then like when I'm with y'all and it's like we have a collective wisdom amongst us, which is like I can see things that are like can sense into things that I wouldn't be able to on my own. And then when Cheryl's like talking about that rippling out to like the largest collective levels, if we learn and sort of participate in this kind of process, the more of us that are participating in it, the larger the effect of like, the more powerful this effect of like flourishing just coming through us. And so there's a kind of like fractal quality to like, I'm dedicating myself to this, and internal to my, I mean, we can even take it down to internal to myself if we use like IFS or something, in all of my parts. I'm trying to like tune into like, what are they trying to do that's good for me, and like how can we flourish as a system, and then tuning into us and what's good here and what's beautiful, what's true, like what's alive, tuning into that, like the groups of people doing that. And the more we grow that capacity, the more we actually like make that, we just empower this, the light side, let's say, you know. We're like really adding to it. And so it can seem sometimes, I think, like it's a solitary thing. I've got it, like there's this whole self-improvement like paradigm, right? But if you take this other one, like that Steve March is talking about, like the unfoldment paradigm, then we're actually like seeing our fundamental relatedness. And like in my own unfolding, I am like contributing to the flourishing of everything around me. And in doing that, like it just has these ripples and ripples and ripples. So I'm not actually like doing wisdom practice for myself and by myself. Like both literally, even when I am in my room meditating by myself, I'm not, it's not, that's not where it stops. And then it's also, as we were pointing out, like super important to like practice in community, to cultivate Sangha, to like, I don't know, Cheryl and I were together at this a retreat that she put on this summer, and you could just feel when you're in a collective flow, like, and people really can access that, like the power of it is insane. And it just has these huge ripple effects. It changed, I think, everybody who was there in a deep, deep way. And also then that just like ripples out into all of our communities and all of our friendships and all of our, you know, and the world around us, how we're like relating to life. It's just such a, yeah, it's just important to like recognize this isn't just about me becoming a better person or something. It's about like all of us and our interrelatedness and how we can serve each other in that way.
I'm noticing just the appreciation of dialogos, and in particular, I'm actually appreciating how much I trust and feel safe, and just kind of, yeah, there's something that feels very risky about just speaking without knowing where it might take you, like kind of like this like launching, it's like it does feel like a launching forward into the unknown. And so much of that feels like, I mean, it's like in the small moment, but it does feel really meaningful that when you're doing that with people who you like, friends that you trust, and you're not doing it alone. Like even just listening, I'll speak and have no, frankly, sometimes, most of the time, I actually truly do not know what I'm saying while I'm saying it. But then I'll hear the two of you kind of respond, and not simply mirror back and reflect back, but like I'll kind of feel into the flow of the whole, like whatever's coalescing between us. And then it feels like it feels like we're nurturing. Yeah, it feels like we're nurturing something that wants to come into being. And then it's okay to sound a little dumb, or yeah, like it's okay. Like I'm coming back to my Aikido like half an hour yesterday of like stumbling. It's like, oh, we can like stumble together. In fact, it's kind of fun to stumble. It's fun to stumble sometimes and like not know, and kind of embarrass ourselves even when it's in a space where there's deep trust and feedback. So yeah, I don't know. I think I just want to name that because I think there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of like fucking up, actually. And I think that's the thing. I think fear holds us back a lot because it's so scary to make mistakes. It's so scary to make mistakes in front of other people. Because we're in a culture, especially in the Western culture, where the idea of being any less than like perfect or falling short of an image of how you want to be feels like existentially terrifying. It's like it just feels so bad. But my sense is like we have to really lean into revealing more of ourselves, almost like nakedly with each other. And then kind of it's what opens up also like the true feedback processes that enable true collective cohering. But yeah, I feel like I'm just kind of disappearing into an abstraction again, really kind of coming back to liking, like, and appreciating and enjoying being here with the two of you. It's kind of as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's Jung said, there's like this safe city walls that every person born at any time in any generation can just stay within. And the patterns in that city, right? Like it's so kind of funny that if you just act the way you see other people act when they shop or they do things, you can do that and like blend right in, especially now with phones. Everyone is like paying attention to their hand. And so if you just kind of, stay in the safe behavior patterns of what's happening in the last 20 years, you can never get called out or hurt and stay like the safest. Obviously there's bad luck and even Job had a bad day or whatever. Like you can have bad things befall good people, but like we're kind of, if you go outside those city walls, which he did and which great thinkers and people do, you are in this uncertainty. And it's really like I love the idea of like the Sangha is the next Buddha, that like do it with a group, do it with other people. Don't try to be like, oh, I'm gonna make instead of 7-minute abs, we'll make the 6-minute abs. If you saw like that movie that had that joke, it's like you can keep doing little better things on your own or with collectives, do these like really cool things. And we're kind of, if you have that mentality, it makes it much easier to be embarrassed. It makes it much easier to just to fail. I don't know if you guys have heard of what's the guy's name? He's a Japanese guy, and he went to like this disheveled nature area and tried to rehabilitate it. And he's part of like I think he's dead now, and I'm losing my train of thought of details, but it's super important, right, to fail a lot, and he had to iterate multiple times. I'll put a link to his name in the notes, but like it's hard to change the world is really what I'm saying, and to commit to things that are pressing current problems. Especially we live in this culture that like despises commitment. Commitment is a sign of failure. If you commit to a relationship when you're young, you're naive. If you commit too much to your job, you're a sucker. Like commitment is in this weird place in our culture, and we're in this Peter Pan world because no one does commit, and that's how you grow. So by committing to groups and to places and to projects, there's this, I think we need more of that, like you're saying, Cheryl, to be part of these bigger, maybe not the biggest bodies, but slightly bigger than just one person or even a few people. That's, I think, these more medium-sized bodies are what can slowly shift things in a better direction. That was like rousing. That's why I'm so excited. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not sure what she's saying, but I get exactly what she's saying.
Ooh, I love that. I don't want to make sense to anyone, but I want them to feel it.
But we just don't know. Like if we knew the answers, and the answers can be stuff people have done before. They don't have to be brand new answers. They can be just going back to things that were working. But I think there is a like an uncertainty in maybe the solutions to some of these bigger problems that we brought up a couple minutes ago. So maybe what's your favorite practice? And we'll like wrap up with a practice-based thing again, like because it is practice is fun. This has been a fantastic conversation. But if someone does stay to the end of this conversation, what would you hope that they're like, oh yeah, let's try that thing that I heard at the end?
I guess for me, I'm gonna go with like my favorite practice is usually like the newest practice because I mean there's well I guess I'll put it on two tracks. My favorite practice if I'm going for the baseline of like what I love is just samadhi meditation. Start with Robert Baez's instructions on energy body meditation and just like roll through everything. The Art of Concentration, retreat on dharmaseed.org, things like this. This would be a great place to start for like this would be if I was going to recommend something. But if I'm just talking about my favorite, like the thing I'm most excited about right now is actually like sort of theater improv that we're using like LARPing as a developmental container. I'm like really experimenting with this with a friend of mine, Kuba Volsky. He does like theater improv, and we're looking at like trying to use improv to get into presence and like teaching people how to be in presence as a like through like specifically focusing doing theater improv on that. And yeah, this is super exciting. So if you see me next time and I'm starting to wear costumes or have other strange mannerisms, that might be what's going on. I might be method acting by that point. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd say that's me.
Hmm. I mean, I guess I can just accept my fate as somewhat. I just love collective presencing. And it's kind of funny because I haven't I have a bit of a I have like I have a difficult relationship with it right now. It was like I experienced the almost like the dark side of it as well, but it's good. It's kind of it is actually more of a I think it's like I better understand its power, including the dark side of its power. But I find collective presencing as a practice is just very, it's a beautiful group intersubjective practice that allows any person to begin to play with what it means and what it feels like to tune into collective fields and to not simply kind of again have like a theoretical model of what is an egregore, what is like a field, what is whatever, but to be like, what if you were actually trying to feel it? What if you were to be incredibly yeah, just like keep noticing the way that your body is this sensing organ that can notice or like have these feedback patterns of always relating to fields. And then to even, and this feels like daring, it's like to try to even channel from and speak to and from that field. And that is, you can kind of like see it as a bit of an improv, like maybe come into it like it's a game. But I would also say there is like something that feels it's like serious fucking play, I guess. It is serious fucking play. Because it's like there is also, you have to become available to, I guess it's kind of, yeah, when someone's meditating and then you start having like the experiences that you've read about, and it's so different. It's like a quantum leap difference from reading about something to actually experiencing it. And I would say collective presencing has that effect of, it's a quantum leap difference to know what it is to actually work with the energies of collective fields. And my sense is that that is like a capacity that is worthwhile for everyone to have more of an attuned awareness of, because we do it all the time unconsciously already. We're already navigating in these sorts of spaces, and it's like kind of like yeah, it's already happening. So bringing a kind of conscious awareness and attunement to it feels really important. So that's a practice that I really love. But the dark side of it is that you're kind of like sinking back into like a kind of participatio mystique. It's like this porousness, this like deep entanglement with, and almost like a boundaryless territory with others. And that's like a whole, that's something you're unlocking, that you have to, there's like also an embodied skillfulness around knowing where it's too much, where it's becoming like where there's a kind of leakage that is actually bordering on harmful for yourself and others. Yeah, so that's a practice that feels very vital in my work right now.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about how awesome improv is and how it unlocks the spontaneity in our minds and the playfulness, and like skillful spontaneity is like, I want that. Like, so I love that, and the play part, and I got to do a little collective presencing, and yeah, it's very like imaginal, libidinal. You don't know what people are going to throw out into the center, which was, it's really fun. Like, it was like, holy moly, this is a thing. And imagining it as like a problem solving tool, or a way to like expose parts of reality that you're not paying attention to, is really cool, because we've lost a lot of those places where like the imaginal used to have a home. Like, I love being in churches with big stained glass windows, or like camping when you're young and you're just like, oh, there's the fire and the darkness at night and everyone's talking and sharing stories, and finding that in like the adult world, and with the elders to bring that stuff in, as well as like, oh, there's problem solving there. So yeah, I just love both of those examples. And I really like this thing called forest bathing. A doctor in Japan kind of invented it. It's not even an invention. It's like a really kind of common sense when you reflect on what it's doing. But you maybe do a little bit of like deep breathing and some meditation, and then just try to savor all the various aspects of a natural environment, like the smells, the like lines and colors of the visual, the sounds, the movement, the stillness. And then like it just kind of gestalts, and you realize you're in nature all of a sudden. If your mind was on projects and problems and people and traffic and all that stuff, and you can just kind of reattune to nature, and it's got like a deepening, like there's a skillful level to it that you can get deeper into your connection to nature. Like, if you see me, you'll just see me like touching trees and touching like the fence on a baseball field near a park or something. And all of a sudden, like, you remember where you were in this whole embodied different way. Like, you're creating this whole representation, or this reality in your memory and your imagination, that it kind of frees you from whatever problems you're having if you're very stuck in a certain way, and reconnects you with a thing that literally, like, we kind of come from and is moving and doesn't have a plan. So it's a great practice. And also, I just love nature, and you could do it in like 20 minutes too. It's just kind of cool. I'll usually do a little bit of standing meditation or sitting meditation, and then just start noticing. And you'll notice like the smell of the earth, or the smell of a tree, or like you'll feel the way like the ground is on your feet. So like you're walking on a wooden thing, or on the sand of the beach, or it's like it's warm or it's cold. And it really is a fun embodied practice that costs nothing. It literally is the cheapest. So that'll be mine. And thank you both so much for doing this. Yeah, I think both of you said today, I love being around both of you, and get so much out of what I think is a friendship. And I'd start blushing if I said more. So that's great.
It's always a pleasure to spend time with both of you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Such a joy.
Practicing what?
Some dance moves.
Keep practicing.
Why weren't you at elf practice?